Math 3, Unit 6, Module 3, Topic 1, Retest Review for Standard 3.2 and Power Standard 4.3. The goal of this worksheet is to get you ready to do a really short version of a retest for Unit 6. There were two questions on the original summative that were both what this worksheet is all about, where they give you a function and then you have to find the inverse of the function. Standard 3.2 is just you remembering that you have to switch the x and the y. So you get a 4 for just switching x and y. Power Standard 4.3 is for actually solving for y after you've switched x and y. I think this is a really good way for a lot of you to increase your grade significantly with doing only 2 questions on a portion of the retest for Unit 6. What I'm going to do with this worksheet is I'm going to do all of the odd problems, and then you'll be in charge of doing the even problems and then turning those in, and then I can grade them and make sure you're ready before you try the retest. So the key thing to remember with these problems is that f of x is the same thing as y. So kind of as a step 0, you're going to put a y instead of f of x. Once you've figured that out, the first step is to switch x and y. Nothing else, just the x and the y like that. And again, that's standard 3.2. If you do that, you get a 4 on standard 3.2. And a lot of you currently have 0s or 1s on that standard on this unit's summative. So that's a really easy way to raise your grade. From here, you want to solve for y, so isolate y by doing order of operations backwards. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides of the equation. And then to undo multiplication, I'm going to do division. So then at the end, we get y equals x plus 8 over 7. That's it. So I'll leave number 2 for you to do. For number 3, again, our first step is that f of x is the same thing as y. So I always put a y over f of x. Then switch x and y, leave everything else alone, just switch x and y. And then now we solve for y by doing order of operations backwards. So I'm going to get rid of the division by 2 by multiplying both sides of the equation by 2. So 2x equals y minus 1. Then, to get rid of that 1, I have to add 1 to both sides. And then that should be it. We have 2x plus 1 equals y. So that is our equation of our inverse. And if you ever see this notation, f little negative 1 and then an x, that is the notation for the f inverse of x. So this could be where y is in the final answer, and that would be okay. That's just f inverse of x. It's just a notational thing. So number 4 is left blank for you to try out, using 3 as an example, of course. On number 5, we're going to replace f of x with y to start. That's kind of like our step 0, remembering that f of x and y are essentially the same things. And then we have to switch x and y. Nothing else gets changed, just switch x and y. If you do that, you get a 4 on standard 3.2. Now I'm going to try to solve for y. There's a radical in this equation. So in order to get rid of a radical, I'm going to have to find a way to cancel it out. Before I can do that, though, I have to isolate the radical. So the radical is this whole thing right here. That's the radical. So I need to get rid of that plus 1 in the front. In the back. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. So x minus 1 equals the 4th root of y minus 2. Now that the radical is isolated all by itself, the way to cancel it out, you have to raise this up to the 4th power because the index was 4. If the index had been 5, I would raise it up to the 5th power to cancel out the radical. If the index had been a 3, I would have to raise it up to the 3rd power to cancel it out. If there is no little index, which is this number right here, it's understood that it's an invisible 2, so you would have to square it to get rid of a square root. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other side. Notice how I put the x minus 1 in parentheses. So it's x minus 1 raised up to the fourth power. Next step, I've got x minus 1 raised to the fourth power. The radical is gone, and now I just need to get rid of that minus 2. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. Final answer, y equals x minus 1 to the fourth plus 2. 6 is left for you to do. On 7, remember f of x is the same as y. Then switch x and y, and then now we're solving for y by doing order of operations backwards. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides to get x plus 5 equals 3y squared. I'm going to undo multiplication by doing division. So divide by 3 on both sides. So now I have x plus 5 over 3 equals y squared. And then in order to undo something squared, you want to do a square root. If that had been, y to the 6th power, I would have to take the 6th root. So when I do my little radical sign, the index would be a 6. If that had been y to the 7th power, I would have to take the 7th root. So since this is a squared, I just had to square root both sides. Now technically, when you introduce a square root or a cubed root, sorry, not a cubed root, a square root, a 4th root, a 6th root, an 8th root, basically any root with an even index, you technically have to add that plus minus symbol in the front. So again, anytime you introduce a square root, 4th root, 6th root, 8th root, any even index into an equation while solving it, you have to add a plus minus symbol in the front like this. And then that would be it. 8 is left for you to try. Number 9, let f of x be y, because they are essentially the same thing. Switch x and y, and then solve for y by doing order of operations backwards. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. And I'm going to undo multiplication by doing division. And then I have x minus 1 all over 2 equals y to the 3rd. So very similar to the last problem, in order to cancel out a cubed root, I have to take I said it backwards. In order to cancel out something to the 3rd power, I have to take a cubed root. So whatever your exponent is, that's the index you need on your radical in order to cancel it out. And whatever you do on one side of the equation, you have to do on the other side to keep it balanced. Since 3 is an odd number, I do not need to add that plus minus symbol in the front. If that 3 had been an even number, then I would need to add that plus minus symbol in the front. So at this point, you should go back and do all the even problems and then turn this in. And then once I feel like you have all those even ones done correctly, I'll let you know, and then you can do the retest for just standard 3.2 and power standard 4.3 from unit 6, which was module 3, topic 1. And hopefully that'll get a lot of your grades up from F's to passing grades.